The Moment Anamorphic Lens. Has 6 months of using this lens changed my mind about it? The Moment Anamorphic Lens was Moment's first push into creating something dedicated to square-lit filmmakers. An anamorphic lens with that beautiful aspect ratio and lens flares, all for only $150. And anyone that knows anything about cine lenses, or in particular anamorphic lenses, will know that these are highly niche, inaccessible, multi-$1,000 pieces of equipment. And over the years, there's been a whole bunch of aftermarket accessories and hacks to try and create that anamorphic aesthetic on your standard DSLR or mirrorless cameras. There's been things you can put in front of your lens, there's little bits of string that you can attach behind it, all to try and create that anamorphic lens flare, but none that give you the true squeezed anamorphic look that you get with the anamorphic lens from Moment. So in our 6 months with this lens, we've done quite a few projects, the biggest of which is the short film we've created for the Moment Invitational. Yeah, that's a plug, links below. But in that time of using it, we've learned some really interesting things about it. Some good and some bad. And what I wanted to do in this video is just to talk you through how using this lens extensively for 6 months has changed my mind about it. So with that, let's look at the good bits of the Moment Anamorphic Lens. The build quality, my mind hasn't changed about this at all. When I first looked at it, it looked like a premium product, and after 6 months of use, it's really stood up to that initial impression. It's a beautiful construction, it's got a lovely aesthetic just in itself, but it's an all metal and glass construction, it feels weighty, and it's truly stood the test of time in using it extensively on shoots. The one part I was a little concerned with was the connector, how the back of the lens connects to your phone case. I thought that might be the flimsy part, the bit that fails on you, but after 6 months of using it, it still stood up and almost as good as new. It's a real testament to the build quality that Moment have put into this lens. The image quality that you get from it is absolutely outstanding. There's something kind of magical that happens when you strap this onto your very ordinary phone camera. It turns a kind of standard looking scene into a beautifully cinematic frame. There's obviously the change that happens with the aspect ratio, the squeezing of the footage. You get those matte bars above and below your review monitor, but there's also an intangible, subtle quality that happens. Something just slightly magical about how the footage now looks. It does still surprise me when I strap this lens on my phone camera how cinematic the footage then looks. And given the right controlled conditions, having your phone camera manual and a little bit of work in post admittedly, you can get some truly stunning looking images from this phone lens. The price and accessibility, and this is something I'm willing to admit where I was wrong. When I first unboxed and looked at this lens, I was thinking, it's $150, that's quite a lot of money for someone that's going to make a film on their mobile phone. But when you consider how accessible this makes the true anamorphic aspect ratio and lens flaring, that cinematic aesthetic for $150 is actually incredible value. And also that who's it for question has become a little bit clearer to us. Now sure, it's a very defined small niche, but for someone that's willing to take a challenge to create some footage on their mobile phone, and for someone that's looking for that true anamorphic aesthetic for less than $10,000, you've actually got that accessibility right here. And for sure, that small demographic or niche is definitely not a beginner filmmaker or an amateur. It really does take someone who's a little bit more experienced, who knows how to work in manual, who knows how to do the work in post-production to get the best out of this lens. But for that small demographic or niche, it really is a great tool. But with that, let's look at the bad points of the Moment Anamorphic Lens. The lens flares. Now it's a little bit misleading for me to say lens flares is a bad point. It is after all what most people are looking for with this lens. And in of themselves, they're incredible, they're beautiful. When you're filming and you catch a moment of lens flare, you feel like you're Michael Bay on the set of Transformers. It's a really great feeling. My problem with them is there's this almost uncontrollable urge when you've got this lens on your phone to look for them everywhere, to the point where it's almost distracting, to the point where they stop becoming this cool little moment that happens in your film and you see them everywhere. It's my kind of criticism of a lot of footage I've seen from people using this lens, is that they're just looking for lens flares for no particular reason. The fact that maybe it's I'm childlike and I can't control my urges, but the lens flares become distracting if you can't control your needs to find them. And that leads me on to my main point, my main criticism of this lens. And it's not really a criticism of this product in particular, it's just that mobile filmmaking still sucks. 6 months on, my mind hasn't been changed about that. It's still a chore to make an entire project in a mobile phone as compared to even a DSLR or mirrorless camera. Undoubtedly, what Moment have made here is an incredible tool for filmmakers. And when you combine this with their other arsenal of photography lenses, what you have is a huge scope for making a whole bunch of different aesthetics and higher quality mobile film footage. However, the technology that surrounds it, the apps in your phone, the post-production, hasn't caught up with the products themselves. It's still hard work to make an entire film in your mobile phone. When you're looking at either the Moment app or something like Filmic Pro, the manual controls are hard to use. If you want to rack focus, as in shift focus during a shot, it's not particularly intuitive or accurate in order to do that. Reviewing the footage in real time, as in making sure you've got your frame right or your exposure correct, is hard on a small phone screen. It's not as good as looking at a review monitor that you get on a cinema camera. Controlling your exposure, your shutter speed or your ISO is as hard as controlling the focus in the shot. The controls to do so are a little bit clumsy, not very intuitive, and by very nature, you're blocking your review monitor whilst you're doing that. And then that leads you on to the accessories which help you use your camera. Things like tripods or gimbals or steadicams. They're not perfectly designed for mobile phones yet. A proper camera tripod isn't made for a mobile phone. And the accessories that do exist that are mobile phone only still aren't that good. We use the DJI Osmo 2 for our short film, and it was less of a help on that and more of a hindrance. Halfway through a lot of the shots, we ended up ditching it and just going handheld. The technology that surrounds mobile filmmaking just isn't quite at the standard needed yet to get the best out of something like the Moment Anamorphic Lens. And the final point that frustrates me about mobile filmmaking is the post-production. You genuinely need to be quite well versed at editing in order to actually be able to manage a whole project that's been filmed on your mobile phone. You're gonna get little quirks like the frame rates aren't exactly what you set in the camera. You're gonna get problems with the audio syncing. You're gonna get problems with your video editor not being able to play the footage properly. There's a whole host of quirky issues that happen that you have to find workarounds for. It just adds to the testament that the technology that surrounds mobile filmmaking just isn't quite at the standard yet, and that perhaps what Moment have done here is ahead of their time. So in summary, after 6 months of this thing, a bunch of short videos for YouTube and one entire short film all on its own has definitely changed my mind about it. It is a tool that has a niche and a proud place on our lens shelf. And to my surprise, it gets used in much the same way as any of our camera lenses or cameras or tools in themselves get used. It is when they're needed. When there's a specific need for that focal length, we'll go for that lens. And when there's a specific need for an anamorphic bit of footage, we will genuinely reach for this lens. So really what I'd love to see is someone like Moment working closely with a phone maker, someone like OnePlus or Samsung, to create a video first phone, not a photography first phone, which we've seen the big push on over the last 5 years, but one that is aimed at filmmakers first. Now that would see the technology jump forward and catch up with things like the Moment Anamorphic Lens to enable filmmakers like us and you get the best out of your gear. But as things stand, mobile filmmaking isn't great. But if you're willing to persevere and spend that extra little bit of time in post-production, you can still get some absolutely incredible results with the Moment Anamorphic Lens. So that's been my grab and go review of the Anamorphic Lens 6 months on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.